Laughter had a particular sound when it came from 100 different species at once. Some clicked, some whistled, some made wet, bubbling noises that Dylan Webb found genuinely disturbing. But they were all laughing at the same thing. Dylan stood in the center of the Varanthos Station Weapons Exhibition Hall, surrounded by display cases that glowed with advanced technology. Plasma rifles that could vaporize a building, gravity hammers that bent space itself, blades forged from compressed neutron star material. And in his hands, he held a wooden spear. The spear was beautiful, if anyone cared to look closely. The shaft had been carved from a single piece of ash wood, aged for 30 years in his grandfather's barn. The grain ran perfectly straight from end to end. The tip had been hardened through a process that took 6 months, using fire and specific minerals found only in the mountains of Montana. Dylan had spent 2 years making this spear, following techniques passed down through his family for generations. Nobody cared about any of that. General Croven pushed through the crowd, his reptilian scales shifting from green to an amused yellow. He stood nearly 8 feet tall and commanded the entire defense fleet of this sector. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had destroyed civilizations. "This is what Earth sends us." Croven plucked the spear from Dylan's hands as if taking a toy from a child. "A stick, more laughter." Dylan said nothing. Ambassador Sereth, the insectoid diplomat who had arranged this cultural exchange, rubbed her front legs together nervously. "Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. Surely Earth has more impressive technology to share." "This is what I brought," Dylan said. His voice was calm, flat, the voice of a man who had learned patience hunting elk in winter forests, waiting hours for a single perfect shot. Croven twirled the spear carelessly. "I have seen your planet's files. You have nuclear weapons, railguns, kinetic bombardment systems. And you bring us a pointed stick that your ancestors used to hunt animals?" "Yes." "Why?" Dylan took his spear back with a movement so quick that Croven blinked in surprise. "Because this is better." The laughter stopped, not because anyone believed him, but because the statement was so absurd that it required a moment to process that a small mammalian creature pushed to the front of the crowd. Dr. Yenopol had gray fur and enormous eyes adapted for low light. She studied primitive civilizations for a living, and she was looking at Dylan with genuine curiosity rather than mockery. "Better how?" she asked. "Better in every way that matters." Dylan ran his thumb along the shaft. "My people have been making spears for 400,000 years. Every generation learned what worked and what did not. Every failure taught us something. Every success was refined. This spear represents 400,000 years of optimization." Croven made a sound that might have been a snort. "Optimization for killing animals. We are discussing warfare across star systems. We are discussing weapons that can crack planets. You are discussing complicated ways to deliver force to a target." Dylan shrugged. "That is all any weapon does. My spear does the same thing. It just does it simply." Merchant Guvax, a bloated creature with too many eyes, called out from the crowd. "I will wager 5,000 credits that your primitive stick cannot scratch the weakest alloy in this room." Others joined in. The betting spread through the crowd like fire. 10,000 credits. 50,000. Someone offered their ship. Croven raised a clawed hand for silence. "Very well, human. Let us test your optimized stick." He gestured to his guards. "Bring a slab of star alloy." The crowd parted as 2 soldiers wheeled in a block of metal that gleamed like captured starlight. Star alloy was the hardest material in known space. It was used for warship hulls and orbital defense platforms. Industrial lasers could barely mark its surface. The slab was placed in the center of the hall. It stood chest-high on Dylan, about 2 feet thick. "Now," Croven said, his scales shifting to a confident orange, "show us what 400,000 years of optimization can do against real technology." Dylan walked to a position 30 feet from the slab. He tested the weight of his spear, feeling its balance. The wood was warm in his hands, almost alive. The crowd pressed closer. Recording drones circled overhead, broadcasting to every screen on the station. Someone had even opened a live feed to the planetary network. Millions were watching. "When your stick shatters," Croven announced loudly. Perhaps humans will finally understand their place in the galaxy. You are children, primitives. You have nothing to teach us. Dylan did not respond. He was somewhere else now, somewhere quiet. A place his grandfather had taught him to find, where thought became unnecessary and the body simply knew what to do. He shifted his weight to his back foot. His shoulder dropped. His arm came forward in an arc that began at his hip and ended at the release point above his ear. The spear left his hand. It did not wobble. It did not curve. It flew in a perfect straight line, spinning exactly twice per second, its hardened tip aligned precisely with its trajectory, and it punched through the staralloy slab like the metal was made of wet paper. The spear continued through the other side and embedded itself in the wall of the exhibition hall, vibrating slightly from the impact. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Doctor Yenapol was the first to move. She ran to the slab and examined the hole. It was clean. Perfect. The edges were not melted or deformed. The spear had simply passed through. Impossible, she whispered. This is impossible. Croven's scales had gone pale. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Dylan walked past him toward the wall to retrieve his spear. For 100,000 years, he said quietly. That is a lot of time to figure things out. He had just pulled the spear free when every alarm on the station began screaming at once. The alarms changed everything in seconds. The laughter and shock that had filled the weapons exhibition hall vanished, replaced by confusion and then fear. Emergency lights painted everything in flashing red. Dylan pulled his spear from the wall and turned to face the chaos. Aliens were running in every direction. Some were checking devices attached to their bodies. Others were shouting in languages his translator could not keep up with. General Croven recovered faster than most. His scales shifted to a dark battle gray as he activated a communication device on his wrist. Report. What is happening? The response came through speakers throughout the hall. Hostile fleet detected. 15 warships. They dropped out of hyperspace at close range. Identification confirmed. Ravek raiders. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Dylan did not know what Ravek raiders were, but he could see the effect of the name on everyone around him. The fear became deeper, more primal. Doctor Yenapol appeared at his side. Her enormous eyes were wide. This is very bad. The Ravek do not take prisoners for ransom. They take them for slave markets. Or worse. How long until they reach the station? They're already launching boarding craft. Minutes. Maybe less. Croven was issuing orders to his soldiers, but Dylan could see the problem. The defense fleet was stationed on the far side of the station. By the time they mobilized, the raiders would already be inside. Ambassador Sereth pushed through the crowd toward Dylan. Her insectoid legs clicked rapidly on the floor. Human, you must come with me. There is a secure bunker for diplomatic personnel. No, you do not understand. The Ravek will kill anyone who resists. They will. An explosion rocked the station. The lights flickered. Somewhere nearby, metal screamed as it was torn apart. They are breaching the outer hull, someone shouted. Section 7. Section 7 is open. Section 7 was 2 corridors away from the exhibition hall. Dylan moved to the entrance and looked down the corridor. Emergency doors were sealing automatically, but he could hear weapons fire beyond them. Screaming. The wet sounds of violence. Croven appeared beside him, a plasma pistol in his clawed hand. What are you doing, human? Listening. Listening to what? How many of them there are? How they move? What weapons they carry? Dylan closed his eyes. His grandfather had taught him to hunt by sound alone, tracking elk through dense forest where visibility was measured in feet. This was not so different. 4 of them breached this section. They're moving fast. They will be through that door in approximately 30 seconds. Croven stared at him. You can tell all that by sound. I can tell more than that. Their leader is injured, probably from the breach. He is favoring his left side. The one behind him is nervous. His breathing is wrong. The other 2 are experienced fighters. They have done this before. How can you possibly know? The emergency door at the end of the corridor exploded inward. 4 Ravek soldiers poured through the opening. They were tall and thin, with gray skin stretched tight over angular bones. Their eyes were completely black, and they carried weapons that hummed with charged energy. The leader saw Kroven and raised his weapon. Dylan threw a spear. T took the leader through the throat and pinned him to the wall behind. The Ravek's shot went wide, burning a hole in the ceiling. Dylan was already moving. He crossed the distance to the nearest soldier before the alien could react, grabbed the barrel of his weapon, and twisted. The alien's arm broke with a sound like snapping branches. Dylan continued the motion, using the alien's body as a shield against the third soldier's shot, then threw the broken soldier into the fourth. The third Ravek tried to adjust his aim. Dylan caught his wrist, redirected the weapon toward the ceiling, and drove his knee into the alien's midsection. As the soldier doubled over, Dylan grabbed his head and introduced it to the wall with significant force. The fourth soldier was trying to untangle himself from his broken companion. Dylan pulled his spear from the dead leader's throat and turned. The fourth soldier looked at him, looked at his three fallen companions, looked at the wooden spear dripping with gray blood. He ran. Dylan let him go. The runner would tell others. That was useful. He turned back to find the entire exhibition hall staring at him through the doorway. Kroven's scales had gone through several colors and seemed to have settled on a confused purple. That was the general search for words. How did you do that? Practice. That is not an answer. Dylan wiped his spear clean on one of the fallen soldiers. My people have been fighting for as long as we have been making spears. We are good at it. Dr. Yenna Pole stepped carefully over the bodies, her scientific curiosity apparently stronger than her fear. The technique you used, it was not random violence. It was systematic, efficient. You disabled them in order of threat priority. Yes. How did you know which one was the biggest threat? The nervous one would hesitate. The injured one was already slow. The experienced fighters were dangerous, but predictable. They had trained responses. I used those responses against them. Dylan looked at her. Your species studies primitive civilizations. Did you think we survived by accident? We were prey animals who became predators. That does not happen to species that cannot fight. Another explosion shook the station. The lights flickered again, and this time some of them did not come back on. Commander Talus pushed through the crowd. He was an aging warrior of a species Dylan did not recognize, covered in ceremonial scars that told stories of old battles. The Ravek are pushing toward the reactor core. If they reach it, they can threaten to destroy the station unless we surrender. How many soldiers do you have? Dylan asked. Not enough. We are a trading station, not a military installation. I have perhaps 50 security personnel against hundreds of raiders. Dylan considered this. Show me a map of the station, specifically the ventilation systems. Why? Because I'm going to hunt them. The ventilation shaft was cramped and dark. Dylan moved through it on his belly, pushing a spear ahead of him, breathing slowly and quietly. The metal walls pressed close on all sides. Most species on the station could not fit in here. Humans, it turned out, were unusually good at squeezing through tight spaces. Below him, through a grating, he could see a corridor filled with Ravek soldiers. There were at least 20 of them, moving in organized groups toward the reactor section. They thought they were safe. They had taken the main corridors. They controlled the checkpoints. No one could stop them now. Dylan counted them, noted their weapons, observed their formation. Then he moved on. He had been in the vents for 40 minutes. In that time, he had killed 11 Ravek soldiers. Not in direct confrontation. That would be stupid. He had learned their patrol patterns, found soldiers who separated from their groups, and eliminated them quietly. Each kill was precise. A single strike. No sound. The bodies were hidden in maintenance closets and storage rooms. The Ravek knew they were losing soldiers. They just did not know how. Dylan found another grating and looked down into a large room. This was some kind of control center. A dozen Ravek were working at computer terminals, trying to hack into the station systems. 2 guards stood by the door, but he moved on. Not yet 3 corridors later, he found what he was looking for. A single Ravek officer, separated from his unit, studying a display on the wall. The officer was trying to figure out where his soldiers were disappearing till Dylan dropped from the ceiling vent and landed behind him. One hand covered the officer's mouth. The spear tip touched his neck. How many soldiers does your fleet have? Dylan asked quietly. The officer made a muffled sound. I'm going to move my hand. If you scream, you die. Not if you understand. The officer nodded. Dylan moved his hand slightly. How many soldiers? 600. The officer's voice was shaking. There are 600 of us on this station. Where is your commander? Warlord Sketh leads from the front. He is pushing toward the reactor with his personal guard. How many in his personal guard? 50 of our best fighters. You cannot stop them. Nobody can stop them. Sketh has never lost a battle. Dylan considered this information. Thank you. The officer never saw the strike that ended him. Dylan climbed back into the vents and continued toward the reactor section. His muscles ached from crawling through tight spaces. His hands were scraped raw from metal edges. None of that mattered. He had been hunting for his entire life. First with his grandfather in the Montana wilderness, tracking deer and elk through impossible terrain. Then in competitions, where he had learned that humans could outperform almost any animal in certain specific ways. Humans could not run faster than a horse in a sprint. But over long distances, over hours and days, humans could run down any animal on Earth. Persistence hunting, his grandfather had called it. The prey would tire. The human would not. The Ravek were starting to tire. Through the vents, Dylan heard them talking. Panic conversations in their harsh language, translated by the device in his ear. Another patrol is missing. Something is in the walls. I saw movement. I know I saw movement. Sketh says to push forward. Stop jumping at shadows. But they were not shadows. Dylan was very real, and he was getting closer to the reactor that he reached a junction in the ventilation system and paused. Below him, he could hear a large group moving. This was different from the others. The footsteps were heavier, more disciplined. This was Warlord Sketh's personal guard. Dylan followed them from above, matching their pace. They moved with professional precision, checking corners, watching for threats. But they never looked up. They never considered that the danger might come from the ceiling. The reactor chamber was ahead. Dylan could see it through a vent cover. The room was massive, filled with glowing conduits and humming machinery. The heart of the station that Sketh's guards entered first, securing the perimeter. Then the warlord himself walked in. Dylan had expected someone impressive. He had not expected this. Warlord Sketh was enormous. He stood over 9 feet tall and was covered in cybernetic enhancements. His left arm had been replaced entirely with a mechanical limb that ended in a massive blade. His chest was reinforced with armor that looked like it had been grown rather than manufactured. His eyes glowed with internal light. This was not a soldier. This was a weapon shaped like a person. Sketh looked around the reactor chamber and smiled. Secure the doors. Begin the override sequence. Once we control the reactor, this station belongs to us. His soldiers moved to comply. Dylan knew he should wait. He should pick off stragglers. He should be patient. That was the smart move. But sometimes the smart move was not the right move. He kicked open the vent cover and dropped into the reactor chamber, landing in a crouch with his spear-ready .50 weapons immediately pointed at him. Warlord Sketh turned slowly. His glowing eyes examined Dylan from head to toe. The wooden spear, the simple clothes, the human body that was so small compared to everyone else in the room. And the warlord laughed. This is it. This is what has been killing my soldiers. Sketh walked closer, each step shaking the floor. A primitive with a stick. Dylan stood his ground. Your soldiers were not very good, and you think you are better? I know I am. Sketh's blade arm hummed as it activated. Then let us find out. The reactor chamber became very quiet. 50 Ravak soldiers formed a circle around Dylan and their warlord. None of them moved to interfere. This was clearly something that happened in their culture. A challenge between warriors. Sketh circled to the left, his mechanical arm catching the light from the reactor conduits. The blade attached to it was longer than Dylan was tall. It glowed with some kind of energy field. I have killed thousands, Sketh said. I have conquered 12 worlds. I have torn apart creatures that would make you weep with fear. And you stand before me with a pointed stick. Dylan did not respond. He was watching, learning. Every movement Sketh made told him something. The way the warlord favored his mechanical arm. The slight delay when he shifted direction. probably from the weight of his enhancements. The confidence in his stance that spoke of countless victories, Sketh was powerful. But power could become predictable. Nothing to say, human, I am waiting for you to attack. Sketh's eyes flared brighter. Bold. Stupid but bold. He charged. The first strike came faster than Dylan expected. The blade arm swept in a horizontal arc that would have cut him in half. Dylan dropped under it, feeling the energy field singe his hair. He rolled to the side and came up running. Sketh followed, each step cracking the floor. His mechanical arm converted to different configurations as he moved. Blade, hammer, something that looked like a claw. Each attack forced Dylan to dodge, to move, to give ground. The Ravek soldiers cheered their warlord. They had seen this before. The prey always ran. The prey always tired. And then the prey died. But Dylan was not tiring. His grandfather had trained him in the old ways. Hours of running through mountain terrain. Days of tracking prey through impossible conditions. The human body was designed for endurance, not speed. Dylan could keep this pace for hours. Sketh could not. The warlord's attacks began slow. Just slightly. Just enough for Dylan to notice. The cybernetic enhancements were powerful, but they drew energy. They generated heat. They had limits. Dylan started to counterattack. His spear darted in during the gaps between Sketh's strikes. Not trying to kill. Not yet. Just testing. Finding the weak points in the armor. Learning the defensive patterns. The spear tip scraped across Sketh's chest plate. Sparked against his mechanical arm. Drew a thin line of blood across his natural hand. First blood. The cheering stopped. Sketh looked at his bleeding hand with something that might have been surprise. You cut me. I'm going to do more than that. The warlord's eyes blazed. He abandoned technique and simply attacked. A storm of blade strikes that filled the air with humming energy. Dylan gave ground, deflecting what he could, dodging what he could not at a strike got through. The blade edge caught his shoulder, cutting deep. Dylan felt the pain distantly, in that quiet place where his grandfather had taught him to go. Pain was information. Pain told you what to avoid next time. Another strike. This one across his ribs. Blood soaked his shirt, but Sketh was breathing hard now. His movements were slower. The cybernetics were overheating. Dylan could see steam rising from the joints of the mechanical arm. You should surrender, Dylan said. Your body is failing. Sketh snarled. I'm a warlord. I do not surrender to primitives. Then you will die like one. Sketh charged one final time. He put everything into it, every remaining bit of power in his cybernetic systems. The blade arm came down in an overhead strike that would split Dylan from head to toe. Dylan stepped into the attack. The IT was the last thing anyone expected. Instead of dodging, instead of retreating, he moved forward. The blade passed over his shoulder, so close that it cut the air beside his ear, and Dylan drove his spear up through the gap where Sketh's chest armor met his throat protection, directly into the warlord's primary heart. They stood like that for a moment. Face to face, the spear buried to half its length in Sketh's chest. Impossible, Sketh whispered. Blood ran from his mouth. I told you, Dylan said quietly. 400,000 years of optimization. The warlord fell. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Ravek soldiers stared at their fallen leader. They stared at the human who had killed him. They did not seem to know what to do. Then Sketh's cybernetic arm began to beep. Dylan looked down at it. Lights were flashing along its length. A countdown had appeared on a small display. 10, 9, 8. What is that? He demanded. One of the soldiers answered, his voice hollow with shock. Dead man's switch. When the warlord dies, it triggers automatically. It is connected to his neural implant. It sends a signal to... The soldiers stopped talking because every light in the reactor chamber had just turned RED. An automated voice filled the room. Warning. Reactor override engaged. Containment failure in 3 minutes. All personnel evacuate immediately. Dylan pulled his spear from Sketh's body. Where is the manual override? The soldiers were already running for the exits. They did not care about conquest anymore. They only cared about survival. One of them pointed as he ran. There, the control station. But the override has to be held manually while the system resets. The radiation will kill anyone who stays. Dylan looked at the control station. It was on the far side of the chamber, near the main reactor core. The air around it was already shimmering with energy. He looked at his spear, at the blood of his enemies on its tip, at the wood that had been carved by his grandfather and his grandfather before him. Then he started running toward the reactor. The radiation warning indicators were turning from yellow to red as Dylan reached the control station. He could feel the energy in the air, a tingling sensation that started in his skin and sank into his bones. This was not going to be pleasant. Behind him, he could hear chaos. The Ravex soldiers were fleeing through every exit. Station security was trying to evacuate civilians. Someone was screaming about insufficient escape pods. None of that mattered right now. What mattered was a manual override lever in front of him. IT was a simple thing. A metal handle connected to a mechanical system that would reset the reactor's safety protocols. All he had to do was pull it down and hold it until the countdown finished. The countdown showed 2 minutes and 47 seconds. Dylan grabbed the lever and pulled. Immediately, he felt the reactor begin to stabilize. The screaming alarms decreased in intensity. The red lights flickered back toward yellow. It was working, but the radiation was building. He could feel it cooking him from the inside. His grandfather had told him stories about radiation, about what it did to the body. Those stories had not prepared him for the reality. His skin began to burn, not from heat, but from the energy particles tearing through his cells. His vision blurred. His hands shook on the lever point. 2 minutes left that he thought about his nephew. A 10-year-old boy who had never held a spear, who had never learned the old ways. Dylan had promised to teach him this summer, had promised to take him into the mountains and show him how their ancestors had lived. 1 minute 45 seconds. The pain was getting worse. His body wanted to let go, to run, to survive. Every instinct screamed at him to drop the lever and escape. He did not let go. 1 minute 30 seconds. Footsteps behind him. Someone was approaching. Through his blurred vision, Dylan saw General Croven running toward the control station. "Human, let me take over. You will die. You cannot fit in here." Dylan's voice was barely a whisper. "The station is too narrow. It was designed for smaller species." Croven looked at the control station and realized it was true. The space around the lever was cramped, designed for maintenance workers of a specific size. His massive reptilian body could not reach it. There must be another way. There is not. Get everyone to safety. I will not leave you here. You do not have a choice. Dylan managed to smile. Besides, dying to save others. It is very human. We have been doing it for as long as we have been making spears. 1 minute left. Croven's scales had gone completely pale. I mocked you. I laughed at your primitive weapon. I said you had nothing to teach us. You were wrong. Yes, I was wrong. 45 seconds. Doctor. Yenna Pole appeared beside Croven. Her enormous eyes were filled with tears. The human is still holding the lever. His vital signs are failing. He is dying. I know. We have to do something. There is nothing to do, except watch. And remember, 30 seconds. Dylan could not see anymore. The radiation had damaged his eyes, but he could still hear. He could hear the reactor powering down, the alarms fading, the crisis ending. He thought about his spear. It was still in his hand. Somehow, the wood was warm against his palm. His grandfather's spear, his great-grandfather's spear, passed down through generations, each one adding their own small improvements, their own tiny optimizations. 15 seconds. He hoped his nephew would take care of it. 10 seconds. He hoped someone would teach the boy how to carve. 5 seconds. The reactor finished its reset cycle. The override lever clicked into its final position. The containment system sealed. The station was safe. Dylan let go. He fell backward, away from the control station, away from the killing radiation. His body hit the floor hard. He could not feel it. He could not feel anything. Someone was lifting him, carrying him, running. Medical team to reactor chamber. Medical team to reactor chamber. Human casualty. Critical condition. Darkness took him. And then, much later, light. Dylan opened his eyes. He was in a bed. White sheets. Medical equipment humming around him. A window showed stars drifting past. You are awake. He turned his head. Dr. Yenapol sat beside the bed, a data pad in her small hands. She looked exhausted but relieved. How long? 3 months. You were in critical condition for the first 6 weeks. The radiation damage was extensive. We had to regrow most of your internal organs. She paused. You should have died. Your doctors say they have never seen a body fight so hard to survive. Persistence. Dylan's voice was rough. Humans are good at persistence. Yes, we are beginning to understand that. There was something on the table beside the bed. Dylan reached for it, his arm shaking with weakness. His spear, someone had cleaned it, polished it, though it gleamed under the medical lights. General Croven brought it, Dr. Yenapol said. He visits every day. He has been very concerned about your recovery. Dylan held the spear against his chest. The wood was still warm. It would always be warm. There's going to be a ceremony, the doctor continued. When you are well enough, the entire Galactic Council wants to honor you. And there's something else. Earth has been granted full membership in the Council. Not despite your primitive technology. Because of it, Dylan closed his eyes. He thought about his grandfather, about the mountains of Montana, about a 10-year-old boy who was waiting to learn how to carve. I want to go home, he said. Soon. I promise. Soon. The ceremony was held in the rebuilt weapons exhibition hall, 3 months after Dylan had finally been cleared by his doctors. The slab of star alloy was still there, the hole from his spear preserved as a reminder. A crowd filled the space, representatives from hundreds of species who had come to witness history. Dylan stood at the center of the room, wearing the simple clothes he had arrived in. His spear was in his hand. He was thinner than before, still recovering from the radiation damage, but his eyes were clear and his grip was strong. General Croven approached him first. The reptilian warrior had changed in the past months. His scales no longer shifted with arrogance. When he looked at Dylan, there was something that might have been respect. I owe you an apology, Croven said. His voice carried through the silent hall. When you first arrived, I called your weapon a toy. I said that humans had nothing to teach us. I was wrong. I was very wrong. He held out something. A piece of star alloy, shaped into a small blade. An inscription had been carved into its surface in careful letters. Dylan took it and read the words. Sometimes the old ways cut deepest. I had it made for you, Croven said. I thought it was appropriate. It is. Thank you. Ambassador Sereth stepped forward next. Her insectoid legs clicked on the floor as she approached. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I am honored to announce that Earth has been granted full membership. Your species has proven itself not through conquest or advanced technology, but through courage, sacrifice, and wisdom. Applause filled the hall. Dylan nodded, but said nothing. Doctor Yenapol was the last to speak. She had prepared a presentation, complete with holographic displays and scientific data. I have spent my career studying what are called primitive civilizations, she began. Species that developed without access to advanced technology. Species that other cultures dismissed as inferior. I believe that technology was the measure of progress. I believe that more advanced weapons meant a more advanced people. She paused and looked at Dylan. I was wrong. Humans are not primitive. They are refined. Every tool they create carries the weight of hundreds of thousands of years of optimization. Their bodies are designed for endurance, for persistence, for survival. Their minds are adapted for problem solving, for adaptation, for cooperation. She displayed an image of the wooden spear. This weapon is not simple. It is the product of more generations of development than any plasma rifle or gravity hammer. Every angle, every curve, every grain of the wood represents accumulated knowledge. Humans did not need our technology to save this station. They used their own. The display changed to show Dylan holding the reactor override lever, radiation burning through his body. And when technology failed, when every advanced system on the station could not prevent disaster, a human held a metal lever for 2 minutes and 47 seconds. Not because he had superior weapons, not because he had advanced armor, because he refused to let go. She turned to face the crowd. That is what 400,000 years of optimization produces. Not better spears, better people. The ceremony continued for another hour. Dylan received medals and honors that he did not understand. Military academies offered him positions that he did not want. Weapon manufacturers offered him contracts that he did not need, that he declined them all. I have a nephew back home, he explained to each offer. He needs to learn how to carve his first spear. That is more important than anything here. Finally, the ceremony ended. The crowd dispersed. Dylan gathered his things and prepared to board the transport that would take him back to Earth. Croven met him at the docking port. "Will you ever return?" the general asked. "Maybe. If you need me. I hope we will not need you. I hope the galaxy will stay peaceful." Croven's scales shifted through several colors before settling on something that looked like sincerity. "But I'm glad to know that if trouble comes, humans are out there, with your wooden spears and your persistence." Dylan smiled. "We will be here. We have been here for a long time. We are not going anywhere." He boarded the transport and found a seat by the window. As the ship pulled away from Varanthos Station, he watched the massive structure shrink into the distance. Lights flickered across its surface. Ships came and went. Life continued. Somewhere in the galaxy, other species were telling stories about what had happened here. About the human with the wooden weapon, the primitive who had shredded star alloy, the warrior who had killed a warlord, the man who had held a lever while radiation burned through his body. The stories would spread. They would grow. They would change, but the truth would remain. Dylan looked at his spear, scarred now from battle, stained with memories. His grandfather had made this weapon. His father had carried it. And someday his nephew would hold it. 400,000 years of optimization. 400,000 years of learning. 400,000 years of refusing to give up. That was what it meant to be human. The transport entered hyperspace, and the stars stretched into lines of light. Dylan closed his eyes and dreamed of mountains, of forests, of a 10-year-old boy waiting to learn the old ways. He was going home.